damn you! God damn you all to hell!
Boys and girls, that was a curse. The spoken word is the closest thing we have to magic. Even Dumbledore agrees. If you have the right words and the right voice, you can accomplish incredible feats just by making mouth sounds. We mostly use words to affect other people, like, could you get me a glass of water? Or,
everybody dance!
Or,
everybody dance now!
But sometimes we use words to create an effect on reality itself, as in, I now pronounce you man and wife. Or,
I dub you Sir Bedivere, Knight of the Round Table.
Or,
I declare bankruptcy!
Those words are like magic spells. They're spoken and something changes. Nothing physically moves, no substances transmute, but just by saying some words, we can create a new reality. Just ask your parents. Sometimes we want to change things that are beyond our power to change, and in those instances, our language is directed not towards one another, but towards something greater than ourselves. We use our words to summon magic or divine assistance to effect change for us. When we wish for good, we call that a prayer or a blessing. When we wish for bad, we call that a curse. When someone sneezes and you say, bless you, that's just lazy for, I'm asking God to bless you. And the same goes for curses. When we stub our toe on the table and we scream out, our words are asking for God, or whatever, to use magic to punish the table. And that's because a true curse is more than a wish, it's more than a hope, it's a plea for some power to do what you are powerless to do yourself. Cursing goes all the way back to the beginning. I'm sure that for thousands of years, early humans were wandering around in the ice and the dirt, with literally everything, including our food, trying to kill us, screaming helplessly, begging for divine intervention was a pretty popular pastime. And once we started getting better at keeping the beasts at bay and civilization became more civilized, our cursing became more structured too. The earliest civilizations in ancient Mesopotamia had these incantation series, these hyper-ritualized sets of words and prayers and chants that were used for all kinds of functions. The set of incantations known as the, Namarim Barudu were specifically used for curse breaking. Around the same time, the ancient Egyptians had their Book of the Dead, which contains long lists of spells, most of which start with some word for mouth or speech or utterance, because again, talking is magic. And when civilization is new and life is utter confusion and everyone that you know dies at 30 from writhing agony tooth decay, you put a lot of energy into begging the gods. We can see this impulse manifested in cultures throughout history. Japanese mythology has this notion of kotodama, which loosely translates to word soul or language power. The Vedic mantras of ancient India had a similar idea that words, or even just certain sounds, not only help sanctify rituals and connect us with the divine, but they also just help folks with their daily lives. Some of the earliest mantras were essentially just prayers to find lost cows or to win at sports. Mantras, just like many kinds of incantations, employ lots of repetition, lots and lots of repetition, and repetition. It's similar to the many, many Jewish prayers, some of which are thousands of years old, that are prescribed for just about every daily event. Things like hearing thunder, seeing rainbows, smelling flowers, smelling fruits, waking up. The relationship with words and magic is in our vocabulary as well. Invocation, as in like invoking the gods, comes from Latin vocare, meaning to speak or to call. An adjuration, which is like a solemn, very formal request, comes from a word meaning to swear by oath, which is also where our word jury comes from. A formal word for a curse is a malediction,
Maledictus, you see.
which literally means bad speech, or a blasphemy literally means a bad saying. An imprecation, which also means a curse, comes from a word meaning to invoke or call upon, and an execration comes from ex secror, meaning literally away from the sacred. So God and us screaming at him are all over the dictionary. So if we invoke magic power with words, then cursing is using those magic words for dark purposes. usually revenge or satisfaction or removal of an obstacle. Again, we cry out for magic when we want something that we can't get with our own power. Curses are just as old as prayers, with ancient traditions like Greek curse tablets, these scraps of lead on which ancient Greeks would scrawl curses and then throw them down wells. My favorite one goes, I curse Tretia Maria and her life and mind and memory and liver and lungs mixed up together, and her words, thoughts, and memory. May she be unable to speak what things are concealed. So it sounds kind of like Maria was about to testify in court. The Romans had things called carmines, which were basically little curses in verses, little evil poems that could be used against enemies. There was one that more or less said, I lost my ring, and may the gods curse anyone called Senecaeanus until he brings it back to the temple. What's kind of cool is this cursed ring was actually later discovered and excavated and shown to a language scholar whose name was J.R.R. Tolkien, and it may have helped inspire a certain story you may have heard of. The Li Ting curse charms originating in ancient China have special words and phrases that invoke the power of the gods to defend against evil spirits. And very popular in medieval Europe, but also dating back millennia, book curses were used to pray for punishment against anyone low enough to steal a book, which was an incredibly valuable item for most of history. And curses are everywhere in our books. There are all kinds of creation stories where gods are cursing things to slither on their bellies and other gods are cursing fig trees because God hates figs. There are even a handful of what are lovingly known as the imprecatory psalms, which are kind of like Solomon's diss track, calling down the good old wrath of the not always quite so merciful Jehovah. In Greek drama, Thyestes curses the house of Atreus, yummy yummy, and Medea curses Jason because he's an idiot and he did her dirty. And you don't do Medea dirty. Dido curses Aeneas for similar reasons, but probably the most literarily significant use of a curse is in Bugs, Season 1, Episode 8 of the CW television drama Supernatural, where the Indians put a curse on the land, and there's lots of bugs.
Carry on my wayward son.
In Shakespeare, we get plenty of curses, the best known being a plague of both your houses. But the curse that we'll look at today comes from Queen Margaret, the she-wolf of France in the play Richard III. Margaret is an incredible character, and she's the only one in the entire canon who appears in 4 consecutive Shakespeare plays. We originally meet her as the wife of Henry VI, who is the last of the Red Rose Kings in the War of the Roses. During Henry VI, Queen Margaret emerges as a dangerously powerful figure. She's ruthless and militant, becoming one of the main belligerents for the Lancastrians. Basically think like Cersei Lannister. Her side is winning the war for most of the time, but she displays her cruelty even in victory by chopping off lots of heads and killing kids and all that good stuff. Eventually, though, the tides turn, and the White Roses, the Yorks, end up defeating the Red Roses. Margaret's husband, King Henry VI, is killed, along with her beloved son, Prince Edward, murdered by the man who would eventually become Richard III. And if you think that Margaret is bad, just wait until Dickie shows up. At the start of the play, Richard III, Queen Margaret is a defeated old woman. She's been banished from the court, which is very sensible, but she's decided to stick around anyway, just skulking around in the shadows, wretched and bitter, haunting all of the people responsible for her downfall. In this scene, she's been listening to all of the newly victorious royals argue with each other about who's on whose side, who likes whom best, and she finally emerges from the dark to curse them all for the crimes that they committed during the war. In her defeat, she is powerless to enact real vengeance, so she must rely on the power of words, the magic that is invoked by curses. She delivers the curse mostly to 2 people, the new queen, who's called Elizabeth, and Richard, later King Richard III, who is the brother of the new king. Now, this speech is very different from the mere insults that we saw last time, because this is a formal curse. It's essentially a magic incantation, so it's highly rhetorical. It's filled with very specific literary devices that Shakespeare uses for emphasis and to direct the listener's attention. As Margaret steps out from the shadows, she takes in these new royals, these people who have taken everything. She says, "Can curses pierce the clouds and enter heaven? Why then, give way, dull clouds, to my quick curses." And already we see a few familiar devices. There's alliteration with curses, quick, and clouds, using those consonants to cut into our hearing. And we also have antithesis, the juxtaposition of two contrasting ideas with dull versus quick. We're going to see a lot of antithesis in this speech, largely because Margaret is trying to overturn the current reality, so it makes sense to have these contrasting ideas put right next to each other. There's lots of places where thy son is set against my son, is versus was, or thy glory versus my wretched self. Antithesis calls attention to the imbalance that Margaret feels in her defeat. Most notable in this speech is the use of repetition. As we mentioned earlier, repetition is a very important part of any prayer or curse or incantation. You may have even found yourself doing this, like if you're watching the sports ball game, you're chanting at the TV,
Yeah! That's what happened! That's what happened! That's what happened! You know it! You know it!
So we know how repetition helps us feel like we're actually doing something. In this speech, there are many different varieties of repetition, all with fancy Greeky Latinish names, which I love. Margaret gets right to cursing, and first takes aim at the new queen. If not by war, by surfeit die your king, as ours by murder to make him a king. She's playing off the two kings, the current king, who she's cursing to die by surfeit or overindulgence, and the dead king, her husband. This echoing of king is known as epistrophe, which is a repetition at the end of clauses. She goes on with Edward thy son, which now is Prince of Wales, for Edward my son, which was Prince of Wales. This is known as simplicy, which repeats both a beginning and end of the phrase. Edward thy son, Edward my son, is Prince of Wales, was Prince of Wales. Gotta love that every friggin' person in this play is like one of three names. Everyone's a Henry or an Edward or a Richard, and then sometimes we call them after places, and then they change their names halfway through, so that's fun. But Queen Margaret takes advantage of this by echoing the names, playing with this sense of balance and imbalance. My son Edward was killed and was replaced by your son Edward, and she prays that he would die in his youth by like untimely violence. She curses the new queen's son, and then goes on to curse the queen herself. Thyself a queen that was for me a queen, outlive thy glory like my wretched self. This use of repetition of queen is known as epanalepsis, where you repeat something from the beginning of the sentence again at the end of the sentence, like, the king is dead, long live the king. She compares herself and the new queen, and then upsets this balance with the antithesis between thy glory and my wretched self. She curses Elizabeth not to die, but to survive and see the downfall of her house, just like what Margaret herself has suffered. These curses are specifically tailored to each person, with the punishment suited to the crime. This kind of device is known as contrapasso, made most popular by Dante's Inferno, where everyone suffers a punishment in hell that is some reflection of their earthly sins. Margaret isn't just damning everyone to general, off-the-rack suffering, she's making it specific, personalized, like tailored suffering. It's custom cursing. But that's also why there's so much repetition, so much antithesis. This curse is trying to create a new balance. After all, that's kind of what revenge is. It's a quest for balance. You take my eye, I take your eye. You ruin my wedding, I'll kill all of you with a sword. Margaret's curses are all aimed at revenge, and so the language she uses highlights balance and imbalance. She goes on, long mayest thou live to wail thy children's loss, and see another as I see thee now decked in thy rights, as thou art stalled in mine. Long die thy happy days before thy death. It's kind of a rhetorical greatest hits right there. You've got antithesis between thou live and children's loss, between thy rights and mine. You got alliteration with long live loss and with die days death, and echoing and repetition with see and see. She's cursing Elizabeth to suffer the same fate that she suffered, to live long enough to see her children die, to witness her own downfall, and then finally, after many lengthened hours of grief, die neither mother, wife, nor England's queen. All throughout this speech, we're seeing an interesting grammatical situation. Most of these curses have an operative verb. Die your king, die in his youth, outlive thy glory. Well, so grammatically, what's going on there? Because these aren't really commands, which we would call the imperative mood. That's things like, take your seats, or put the gun down, or everybody get in the bag. These curses are more like wishes. I hope your king dies. I wish you would outlive your glory. which is closer to what we call the optative mood. Now, the optative is used for when we express desires or hopes. English doesn't have a unique form for the optative. It's more common in ancient languages, but we use it in constructions like, would that I had more hair, or if only I could dance. We use it in group instructions like, let's do this, and with individual instructions like, have a great day, or God bless you. And in this form, especially when we use it to invoke a greater power, it's something in between a command and a wish. Or maybe another way to think of it is that it's a wish in the form of a command. The optative, therefore, is what's behind the fuel in these verbs like die, outlive, long mayest thou live, die, and, you guessed it, die. It's at this point in the speech that Margaret gets interrupted and turns her attention from the new queen to the play's arch-villain, Richard. Remember now, this is the guy that killed the former king and prince, Margaret's husband and son. If heaven have any grievous plague in store, exceeding those that I can wish upon thee, oh, let them keep it, another optative verb, till thy sins be ripe, and then hurl down, again optative, their indignation on thee, the troubler of the poor world's peace. Margaret's hate for Richard is so deep that she begs heaven to cook up something worse than she can imagine, and then to hurl it down once Richard's at his most sinful, damnable point in life. I think it's really interesting, by the way, that heaven here is treated with plural pronouns, as though, like, there's lots of them up there. She curses Richard with confusion and exhaustion. Thy friends suspect for traitors while thou livest, and take deep traitors for thy dearest friends. So there's alliteration with poor and peace, and with deep and dearest, and antithesis contrasting traitors and friends. But we also see use of chiasmus, echoing words in an alternating pattern, forming like an X or a chi shape. Friends, traitors, traitors, friends. It is the exact same construction as
With my mind on my money and my money on my mind.
These wish commands also pack the fuel of the curse, which continues on with no sleep close up that deadly eye of thine, unless it be whilst some tormenting dream affrights thee with a hell of ugly devils. And as she gets carried away with cursing Richard, she descends into this list of insults. Thou elvish marked abortive rooting hog, thou slander of thy mother's heavy womb, thou loathed issue of thy father's loins. This is anaphora, which uses repetition at the start of lines, just hammering the insult home. Also a little bitiligmia for good measure. Richard interrupts her again, and they do this silly little squabble thing for a second, and then everyone in the room starts ganging up on Margaret, with the new queen, Elizabeth, temporarily siding with Richard to buffet away Margaret's curses. But Margaret replies to her, "Poor painted queen, vain flourish of my fortune, why strewest thou sugar on that bottled spider?" A lot of alliteration there, as Margaret calls out the queen for backing up Richard and being sweet to this bottled spider. She says, "The time will come when thou shalt wish for me to help thee curse that poisonous bunch-backed toad." And in just a few acts later, we see that this is exactly what happens. Everyone in the room tries to dismiss crazy old Queen Margaret and her kooky old curses, but she finishes strong. "Oh, but remember this another day, and say poor Margaret was a prophetess." Alliteration and antithesis again, and then one final curse. "Live each of you the subjects to his hate, and he to yours, and all of you to God's." There's a touch of chiasmus there with you, his, he, yours, but it also forms this daisy chain, a device known as anadiplosis, where each phrase picks up and builds on the next. You to him, he to you, all of you to God. Margaret curses the whole room of her victorious enemies to face the hate of one another, and for all of them to suffer under the hate of God.
Can curses pierce the clouds and enter heaven? Why then, give way, dull clouds, to my quick curses. If not by war, by surfeit die your king, as ours by murder to make him a king. Edward, thy son, which now is Prince of Wales, for Edward, my son, which was Prince of Wales, die in his youth by like untimely violence. Thyself a queen, for me that was a queen, outlive thy glory like my wretched self. Long mayst thou live to wail thy children's loss, and see another as I see thee now, decked in thy rights as thou art stalled in mine. Long die thy happy days before thy death, and after many lengthened hours of grief, die neither mother, wife, nor England's queen. If heaven have any grievous plague in store, exceeding those that I can wish upon thee, oh, let them keep it till thy sins be ripe, and then hurl down their indignation on thee, the troubler of the poor world's peace. Thy friends suspect for traitors while thou livest, and take deep traitors for thy dearest friends. No sleep close up that deadly eye of thine, unless it be whilst some tormenting dream affrights thee with a hell of ugly devils. Thou elvish-marked, abortive, rooting hog! Thou slander of thy mother's heavy womb! Thou loathed issue of thy father's loins! Poor painted queen! Vain flourish of my fortune! Why strew'st thou sugar on that bottled spider? The time will come when thou shalt wish for me to help thee curse that poisonous bunch-backed toad. Oh, but remember this another day, and say poor Margaret was a prophetess. Live each of you the subjects to his hate, and he to yours, and all of you to God's.
As we can see, the nature of a curse is much more structured and complicated than we find with mere insults. The use of repetition, rhetoric, punishments tailored to each target, and this desperate wish-command use of optative verbs makes this curse a truly powerful piece of language. We might think that it's superstitious to believe that words have actual magic, which it is. There's no denying that language is, at the end of the day, just sounds and shapes. It's grunts and scribbles, which nonetheless have the power to dramatically affect the world. It's no surprise that the spoken word has always been revered as a great power and feared as a great weapon. Even Caliban, who is supposed to despise humanity and civilization, admits that you taught me language, and my profit on it is I know how to curse. A big thanks to Broadway's Jennifer Fouché for lending her time and fabulous talents, and a big thanks to Marek and Madeline for being such big fans of the show. Thank you for watching.